The imperial citadel of Valerius Prime was not a place where mistakes were tolerated. It floated in orbit around the jewel of the Imperium, a colossal ring-shaped station of polished white alloy and glowing crystal towers. Inside its walls lived the most powerful beings in the galaxy: generals, senators, nobles, and the emperor himself. Every corridor was guarded. Every servant knew their place. Every guest understood the rules. And one of those rules was simple. No one approached the emperor's daughter. Not anymore. Once, Princess Aelira Valerius had been the light of the empire. People used to whisper stories about her kindness, her curiosity, and the way she wandered the halls asking engineers how starships worked. But that had been 10 years ago. 10 years ago, something terrible happened. After that day, the princess stopped speaking. Completely. Doctors from dozens of worlds tried to help her. Cybernetic specialists rebuilt damaged neural pathways. Alien healers attempted ancient rituals. Nothing worked. Aelira sat in silence, unable to move, unable to speak, her body locked in stillness like a statue. The emperor ordered an entire wing of the citadel dedicated to her care. But time passed. The court stopped visiting. Ministers stopped mentioning her. And eventually, the princess became something people avoided discussing, like an old ghost haunting the palace. Only a few attendants remained with her now. One of them had a simple duty. Every evening, the princess was brought to the Imperial Garden Hall, where she could sit beneath artificial sunlight and watch people move through the massive chamber. She never reacted. Never blinked differently. Never spoke. It had been that way for a decade. Until the day a poor mechanic sat beside her. The arrival of Yarrick Holt. Yarrick Holt did not belong in the Imperial Citadel. He knew that. His boots were worn. His jacket smelled faintly of engine coolant. His hands were scarred from years of working inside ship engines that most nobles didn't even know existed. He was a mechanic. A damn good one, though. 3 days earlier, an Imperial cruiser had nearly lost its main reactor during a hyperspace jump. Yarrick happened to be working on the dockyard platform where the ship arrived. While Imperial engineers panicked and argued about diagnostics, Yarrick crawled inside the reactor chamber and fixed the problem in less than 15 minutes. Apparently, saving a billion-credit warship gets attention. Now he had been summoned to the Citadel. Not for punishment. For reward. At least that's what the official message claimed. But standing in the enormous palace hall, surrounded by gold pillars and polished floors that reflected his scuffed boots, Yarrick felt deeply uncomfortable. "Relax," said the palace attendant walking beside him. The woman wore silver robes marking her as a court liaison. "Relax," Yarrick muttered. "I'm standing in the Emperor's house." "Technically," she said, "this is a station." "That doesn't help." She smirked slightly. "You'll meet the Engineering Council tomorrow morning. Tonight you're simply a guest. A guest who doesn't know where he's allowed to sit. That's why you follow the seating markers." They entered the garden hall. Yarrick stopped in his tracks. The chamber was enormous. Artificial sunlight streamed through crystal panels in the ceiling, illuminating trees grown in perfect rows. A river of glowing blue water flowed through the center, crossed by marble bridges. Tables were scattered across the garden for guests to sit and enjoy the view. It looked less like a room and more like an entire park built inside the palace. "Pick any open table," the attendant said. Then she turned and left. Just like that. Yarrick stood there awkwardly for a moment. Nobles walked past him in elegant clothing. Officers in polished uniforms discussed fleet movements. No one paid him much attention, which was good. Yarrick scanned the tables. Most were crowded with people talking loudly. He spotted one near the river that was completely empty except for a single woman sitting in a chair. Perfect. Quiet. Exactly what he wanted. He grabbed a plate from a nearby serving station and walked over. The woman sat with perfect posture, her hands resting gently in her lap. Her long silver hair flowed over the back of the chair. She didn't turn when he approached. Didn't acknowledge him at all. Yarrick assumed she was simply lost in thought. "Mind if I sit?" he asked casually. No response. He shrugged and pulled the chair out anyway. "Long day," he muttered, setting down his plate. Still nothing. He took a bite of food. Strange silence hung over the table. Yarrick glanced sideways. The woman hadn't moved at all. Her eyes stared forward at the river. Unblinking. He frowned. You okay? No response. Not even a twitch. Yarrick leaned slightly closer. Her breathing was steady. Her eyes were open. But something felt wrong. Then he noticed something else. 2 palace attendants stood far away near the entrance, staring at him with wide eyes. One of them looked horrified. The other was already rushing out of the room. Yarrick blinked. That can't be good. He looked back at the woman. Up close she was strikingly beautiful. But there was an unnatural stillness about her face. Almost like a statue. Look, Yarrick said awkwardly, if I took someone's seat, just say the word. Silence. Then a group of nobles walked past the table. They froze. One whispered something. Another gasped. Yarrick heard the words clearly. Is that the princess? His stomach dropped. Princess? He turned slowly. Then he noticed the subtle golden emblem embroidered into the sleeve of her dress. The imperial crest. And suddenly everything made sense. The empty table. The attendants staring. The nobles whispering. Yarrick had just sat down beside Princess Aelira Valerius, the Emperor's silent daughter. Oh, how? The mistake everyone saw. Within seconds the entire hall began to notice. Whispers spread like wildfire. That's her table. Who is that man? Did no one stop him? He's sitting beside the princess. Yarrick felt sweat forming on his neck. Maybe he should leave. Slowly. Quietly. He pushed his chair back slightly. The princess didn't react. But before he could stand, a voice thundered across the hall. Stop. The room went silent. Imperial guards marched in from the main corridor, their black armor gleaming. Behind them walked a tall man with silver hair and piercing eyes. Every noble in the hall immediately bowed. Yarrick recognized him instantly. The Emperor. Emperor Salus Valerius. The ruler of the largest human empire in the galaxy. And he was staring directly at Yarrick. Not with anger. With curiosity. The Emperor approached the table slowly. His gaze shifted briefly to his daughter. Then back to Yarrick. You, the Emperor said calmly. Yes, sir, Yarrick replied, trying very hard not to panic. Do you know where you are sitting? Yes, sir. And yet you remain seated. Yarrick hesitated. Well, I already started eating. A few nobles gasped. One woman nearly fainted. The Emperor studied him for a long moment. Then something unexpected happened. The Emperor smiled. A small, tired smile. You are either the bravest man in the empire, he said quietly, or the most foolish. Probably the second one, Yarrick admitted. The Emperor looked at his daughter again. She hadn't moved. Hadn't reacted. Just like always. 10 years of silence. 10 years of nothing. But the Emperor did something strange. He turned to the guards. Leave him. The hall erupted with whispers. Your Majesty? A guard asked. The Emperor raised a hand. This man will remain seated. He looked at Yarrick again. Tell me, mechanic, what is your name? Yarrick Holt. Well, Yarrick Holt, the Emperor said. No one has willingly sat beside my daughter in 10 years. Yarrick swallowed. Sorry about that. The Emperor chuckled softly. No, he said. Don't apologize. Then the Emperor said something that would change everything. Stay. Yarrick blinked. Stay. Yes. The Emperor turned away slightly. Talk to her. The room fell silent. Sir, Yarrick said carefully, I'm pretty sure she can't. Just talk. The Emperor's voice was gentle. But it carried an order no one could refuse. Yarrick looked at the princess. Still motionless. Still silent. He sighed. Well, he muttered. This is going to be awkward. He leaned back in the chair. Hi, he said casually. My name's Yarrick. For 10 years no one had heard the princess speak. But at that moment, something inside her mind stirred. And across the entire hall, her finger moved. Just slightly. End of part 1. The moment the princess's finger moved, the entire hall froze. It was such a small movement that many people didn't notice it. But the Emperor did. His eyes widened slightly. "Did you see that?" one attendant whispered. Another shook their head nervously. "Impossible, she hasn't moved in years." Yarrick, however, had been sitting right beside her. He definitely saw it. He stared at the princess's hand. Sir?" he said quietly to the emperor. "Yes. I think your daughter just moved." The hall erupted in murmurs. The emperor stepped closer to the table. "Say that again." "I'm serious," Yarrick said. Her finger twitched. The emperor looked down at Alira. For 10 long seconds nothing happened. The princess sat exactly as she always had. So, silent, motionless. One of the nobles scoffed quietly. "Clearly the mechanic is mistaken." But Yarrick wasn't convinced. He leaned closer to the princess. "Hey," he said softly. Still no response. He scratched the back of his head. Well, maybe it was just a reflex. The emperor exhaled slowly. Hope flickered across his face for a brief moment, then faded. For 10 years he had seen false signs before. Doctors thought they saw blinking patterns. Scientists thought they detected brain responses. But every time it led to nothing. The emperor turned back to Yarrick. "Continue speaking." Yarrick blinked. "About what?" "Anything." Yarrick looked around the hall. Hundreds of nobles were staring at him. The emperor of the galaxy was waiting for him to talk to a princess who hadn't spoken in 10 years. "This is officially the weirdest day of my life," Yarrick muttered. Then he looked at Alira again. "Well, okay." He leaned back casually. "So, I'm a mechanic," he said. Silence. "I fix ships mostly. Engines, reactors, propulsion systems." "Nothing." Yarrick shrugged. "Today I crawled inside a cruiser's plasma chamber to stop it from exploding. That was fun." The princess didn't react. But something inside her mind stirred again. Inside the silent mind. For 10 years Alira Valerius had been trapped. Her body refused to move. Her voice refused to work. But her mind had never stopped. She could hear everything. Every doctor. Every attendant. Every whisper in the palace halls. She screamed inside her own head for years. But no one could hear her. Then eventually, she stopped trying. Silence became her prison. Until today. Because today someone was speaking to her like she was normal. Not like a broken machine. Not like a patient. Not like a tragedy. Just a person. Inside her mind she listened carefully. The mechanic's voice was calm and relaxed. Almost amused. "I once fixed a mining ship using duct tape and a spoon," Yarrick continued. A noble nearby frowned. "That's impossible." Yarrick shrugged. "Worked though." Inside her mind. Something shifted. Alira focused every ounce of strength she had. For 10 years her body had ignored her commands. But now, she tried again. More. Just a little. More. The second movement. Back in the garden hall, Yarrick was still talking. "Anyway," he said, "the engineers were pretty mad I solved it before they could." Then, the princess's hand moved again. This time it was undeniable. Her finger curled slightly. The emperor gasped. "Guards?" But the guards didn't rush in. They simply stared. Because everyone in the hall had seen it. The princess moved. After 10 years, Yarrick nearly fell out of his chair. "Okay, now that definitely happened." The emperor stepped forward quickly. "Alira?" No response. But her hand trembled slightly. Yarrick looked at the emperor. "What's happening?" The emperor's voice trembled slightly. "For 10 years, nothing." He looked at Yarrick again. "And now she moves when you speak." Yarrick blinked. "You think I'm doing that?" The emperor didn't answer. Instead he said quietly, "Continue." The mechanic who wouldn't panic. Yarrick rubbed his face. "All right, princess," he said. "If you're listening, I'm going to keep talking." He gestured around the hall. "This place is ridiculous, by the way. Do you know how expensive these trees must be?" A noble gasped. The emperor actually laughed quietly. And for the first time in 10 years. The princess's lips twitched. Barely. But it was there. A tiny movement. Yarrick noticed it instantly. "Did you see that?" The emperor's heart pounded. "Yes." The princess was reacting. Not randomly. To him. The truth revealed. Over the next hour, something incredible happened. Yarrick kept talking. About ships. About repairs. About stupid mistakes engineers make. Every time he spoke, the princess reacted slightly. A finger. An eyelid. A small shift in breathing. Imperial doctors rushed into the hall and began scanning her brain activity. The results shocked them. Her neural signals are increasing, one doctor said. That's impossible, another whispered. The Emperor looked at Yarrick. Why you? Yarrick shrugged. I'm just talking. But the truth was more complicated. Inside her mind, Alira finally understood something. Everyone else had spoken around her. Doctors discussed treatments. Attendants whispered about her condition. But Yarrick spoke to her. Not like a princess. Not like a patient. Like a normal person. And somehow, that reached her. The first word. 3 hours later, the hall was nearly empty. Only the Emperor, several doctors, and Yarrick remained. Yarrick had run out of stories. So, yeah, he said. That's how I accidentally blew up a cargo drone. The Emperor chuckled. Alira's eyes shifted slightly. For the first time in 10 years. She looked at someone. She looked at Yarrick. The Emperor froze. Alira? Her lips trembled. Doctors leaned closer. Yarrick leaned forward. Hey, princess. Her voice came out as barely a whisper. Broken. Weak. But real. Again? Everyone in the hall stopped breathing. Did she? A doctor whispered. Yarrick blinked. You want me to tell the story again? The princess's lips moved again. Again? The Emperor collapsed into a chair. Tears streamed down his face. My daughter. For 10 years she had said nothing. And the first word she spoke was to a poor mechanic. The hidden reason. Over the following weeks, the truth slowly emerged. Doctors discovered that Alira had never been fully paralyzed. Her brain had entered a protective state after a traumatic event. Years earlier, assassins had attacked the imperial family. Alira had witnessed something horrifying. Her mind shut down her body to survive the trauma. Every treatment failed because doctors focused on physical solutions. But the real prison had been psychological. And Yarrick unknowingly broke through it. Not with medicine. Not with technology. But with something simple. Conversation. Normality. Human connection. The Emperor's decision. One evening, the Emperor summoned Yarrick to the throne chamber. You saved my daughter, the Emperor said. Yarrick shook his head. I just talked to her. Exactly. The Emperor studied him carefully. My daughter speaks now. Slowly, but she improves every day. That's good. The Emperor leaned forward. She asks about you constantly. Yarrick blinked. That's unexpected. The Emperor smiled slightly. She says you treat her like a person. Well, she is a person. The Emperor stood. Yarrick Holt. Yes, sir. I would like to offer you a position in the Imperial Court. Yarrick nearly choked. A mechanic in the court? No, the Emperor said. Something more important. He placed a hand on Yarrick's shoulder. My daughter's friend. The final scene. Months later, the garden hall was lively again. Princess Alira sat by the river. But this time she wasn't silent. Her movements were slow but improving. Yarrick sat beside her as usual. And that's why you never hit a reactor with a wrench, he said. Alira smiled faintly. You did that, didn't you? Yarrick sighed. Maybe. She laughed softly. The sound echoed through the garden. For the first time in a decade, the princess laughed. Across the hall, the Emperor watched quietly. A general approached him. Your Majesty, the fleet awaits your command. The Emperor nodded. But his eyes stayed on his daughter. And the mechanic sitting beside her. Sometimes, the greatest miracles in the galaxy didn't come from advanced technology. Or powerful empires. Sometimes, they came from a poor mechanic who simply chose the wrong table. And decided to stay. The end.